This is Getting Past Subtitles. My name is Sean Peel.
This is DK Lee.
And welcome back. We are back. After a little hiatus, we are here to start the new year, fresher than ever. Got a lot of things coming. Pretty excited. So, how was your new year, Lee?
It was great. My brother got married.
Wow.
So,
okay, cool.
Yeah, it was a very hectic and busy new year, but everything's going all right.
No one's going to know, and eventually you'll see, but Lee's had long hair for... when I first met him, he actually had short hair. And then over like 2-3 years, he didn't cut it, and it just like grew out really long. And so he cut it for his brother's wedding, and I had to blink like 5 times.
Make sure I was the right person.
Like, did we just travel back in time to previously?
Yeah.
Which I also cut my hair too, but before. I think you saw it before, right?
Yeah, I did.
So I actually cut my hair too. I grew out a little long, but definitely not to your length.
Yeah, it was long overdue. My hair went down to my to almost my back, all the way down. So
dang,
it's been pretty long.
Fresh year, fresh us. That's what we're going with.
Yep.
We're pretty good. I nothing much. Took some vacation time off. Had some friends come over, explore the city, and then I caught COVID for the second time. But all is well. I'm not dead. It actually wasn't bad compared to the first time. But I don't know. I think nature is just trying to get out me.
He's just the vid magnet.
I don't know what to say. I keep winning the fight. So I don't know why it's not backing off yet. I should have like 3 immunities.
You probably do now,
right? No big deal. But yeah, so we got a lot of things coming and changing, and we were kind of thinking, once we come back, what we wanted to do for the series to kick off, and we thought we would kind of go back to when we first started. Right, we did a director's filmography, retrospective, and we did it with Bong Joon-ho because Parasite had just come out. We thought it was a good time, and so kind of think about it this year. We were going to go back and do another retrospective. And I've been wanting to do Park Chan-Wook for a little while, just kind of sitting in my head. And I thought that it would be, kind of in line to do it this time. Another very prominent Korean director. Essentially, they're kind of 2 peas in a pot with him and Bong Joon-ho. Very similar, but also, very different in their storytelling. But they're both probably, the top 2 figures, I would say, for South Korean cinema today. So I'm pretty excited. He's got an interesting, when I was looking, he's a veteran to the podcast. We watched JSA for the mystery series, Joint Security Area. So everybody should be a little familiar. But his filmography has kind of been a little bit everywhere. It's funny because he's done a few things, but he has a very wide variety of projects under his belt. Feature films specifically, he only has 5 right now. But he's over the years, I think as he continues to do work, he's branched out to short film projects and television now. He's doing a lot of television, and so it kind of eats away a little bit into the future. But it's just funny to see how prominent he is, but he's only has a couple films under him compared to Bong Joon-ho, which I feel has more features for sure, But Park Chan-Wook is a little more variety in what he does. So I kind of realized that, and the 4 films that I decided to go with was his Vengeance trilogy, obviously. So this episode we'll be talking about Sympathy for Mr.Vengeance, which we watched, and then following we'll be doing chronologically. So Old Boy will be the next week, followed by Sympathy for Lady Vengeance. And then we'll conclude it with his last feature, The Handmaiden. So there's we're skipping over a couple other films, but I thought that, these films are basically all Vengeance films, so they're kind of thematically the same.
Yeah.
And even personally, so these are the ones that I've all seen. I haven't seen some of the others, but these are kind of, I think, the most attention-grabbing of his films.
And they're probably the most iconic
exactly
of his films as well.
When you think of him, these are the films that will come to mind,
Yeah.
versus the other things. So I'll just go into some backstory of Park Chan-Wook that I have here, kind of give the spiel on who we're talking about. So in his younger days in college, he actually studied philosophy in the beginning. But at his university, he founded a film club. And in the club, he basically wrote articles about different movies. And he essentially kind of became like a critic in that way.
Mm-hmm.
And that would carry over later. And so it wasn't until he saw the movie Vertigo that really inspired him to chase filmmaking specifically. So post college, he would still write to be a film critic for real under like journal publications, but he would also be an AD or an assistant director for a couple of directors in the area at the time. So in 1992, he would come out with his director debut with a film called The Moon is the Sun's Dream. And then 5 years after that, he would release a sophomore film called Samingjo in 1997. Now, both these films were basically flops, kind of like failures. It didn't do too well, and both like critically and like commercially for sure.
Yeah.
So with that, he basically just went back to being a film critic and still wrote as like his main career at the time. So it wasn't until the year 2000 that Park Chan-Wook was the household name that we kind of know him now, and that's when he came out with JSA. So like I think it was like based off of a book, right? And he adapted it for the screen. And at the time of its release, it became the highest grossing film in South Korea of all time. And it was commercially, obviously, but also critically praised, and everybody loved him for it. Soon after, it would be, surpassed by like Taeguki, for example. But when it came out, it was a big deal. So because of that success of a film, he kind of had a blank check to make any project that he wanted to do next.
Right.
And then so in 2002, that's where Sympathy for Mr.Vengeance came from. So this was like the product of post that film. So the reception for this film was definitely different compared to JSA. It's a good movie, but I think critically it was more polarized and kind of mixed. But I think generally leaning positively, but also like commercially not nowhere near as JSA for sure.
Right.
But still a good movie nonetheless. And so he would go to make Old Boy after that, another revenge-based film. And I think it just kind of happened to be that way. And it was Old Boy that really solidified Park Chan-Wook to be who he is today, like in the eye of the public. Like I think that is his most...
And globally too, right?
And globally, yeah. Because like it premiered at Cannes, I think, right? So that's when it made its world stage, and it won like all these awards in Cannes. It has like the second highest award that you can win there. And so it really got into a public eye globally. And it's really just generally seen as his most prominent film for sure, his most praised film. And so following Old Boy, he would do a third revenge film. And that would kind of tie the knot with the unofficial Vengeance trilogy, as we call it today. And that was with Sympathy for Lady Vengeance. So I have a quote here that kind of explains like why he did 3 revenge films. So he did Sympathy for Vengeance just because, obviously that was like a script. Then he did Old Boy. And so he says, I got this from IMDb, and I don't remember where this quote came from. So sorry about to cite it. He said, when I was about to start Old Boy, I was somewhat concerned about making 2 films on vengeance back to back. I even thought about refusing the project, but my wife convinced me by saying, if the story is interesting, isn't all that matters? Then reporters kept asking me about 2 vengeance films and why I was doing them one after the other. I felt like they were criticizing me for choosing to tell horrible stories instead of one that is a beautiful story.
Yeah.
And then, before I realized it, I'd announced that I wasn't just making 2, but 3 vengeance films. It was actually just a spontaneous statement in an interview, and I regretted it deeply, but I couldn't take something back I said in public. So you could say the trilogy owes its conception to Korean journalists. So basically, like when he came out with Lady Vengeance, it was just a product of backing himself into a corner, you know, and
keeping the promise.
You're just shooting yourself in the foot, And it's what I would definitely say. We'll talk about this when we get there, but it's definitely like the weakest link, I think, of the trilogy. But it's not a bad film whatsoever, But the other 2 are definitely more loved, in my opinion. So, post all these Vengeance films. He still works, so he's done features such as I'm a Cyborg, but That's Okay. He did a vampire film called Thirst. He did a couple short films, one that was shot entirely on an iPhone called Night Fishing, and I think he did that with his brother, actually. He did an English film called Stoker.
Yeah.
And then following Stoker, I think like 2016, he would release The Handmaiden, and that's his currently his last feature that he did. But he's done a few other television things. So right after The Handmaiden, he did Little Drummer Girl, which is also English spoken. And in the future, we have looking forward to 2 projects for sure. So one is a feature that he's shooting now, I think as of April of last year, which is called The Decision to Leave. And I actually think that it's another Vengeance film. And then he's attached to do another like mini television series produced by A24 called The Sympathizer. So I was like reading another like quote or interview or something, and he said post The Drummer Girl that he was working on like 2 feature scripts, and one of them was a Vengeance related one.
Yeah.
Like a 4th installment essentially. So that's why I think that the film that he's shooting now might be it. And then he basically got attached to A24's project, like it wasn't his writing. So that's interesting. Him and A24 should be cool. I'm excited for that.
Yeah, I think he kind of has the right fit for that.
It's pretty surprising. Like A24's got some pull now, yo.
I mean, I think they're always kind of looking for things that are a little more out of the
100%.
Out of the what do you call it?
Ordinary.
Yeah, out of the ordinary, but out of like the real like Hollywood kind of esque.
Yeah.
Films. They kind of look towards something a little more out of the reach.
Yeah, they're definitely known to be like when I think of A24, they like challenge like filmmaking.
Yeah, they're more looking towards the boundaries of filmmaking. I think in terms of like the variety of the kind of films that they choose,
right, and
they curate.
Yeah, so that's they're special about that. They're probably my favorite. So to get back on track about this film, Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance, like I said, came out in 2002. A little tidbit I'll share now is that originally he wanted to experiment with the colors and make it fade from color to black and white as a desaturation. But because of budget constraints, he wasn't able to do that. But he would revisit the idea with Lady Vengeance, with the director's cut that they released, the Region 3 Special Edition I have written. And in that version, there would be a desaturation.
Yeah.
So doesn't that sound familiar, Lee? So a little story is that when I saw Sympathy for Lady Vengeance first, I saw it in that version. And I thought that was like the theatrical version.
Yeah.
And then it wasn't until after I did some digging that I was like, oh, this was like a director's cut thing. Like this wasn't even it. But it feels right. And I think we're going to do that, right, for this version. So just a heads up. You'll be watching the director's version.
I mean, you can watch whichever one you want.
But like, it's like a little thing in hindsight, but it's pretty significant.
Yeah.
Like when I think about that movie, like that's the thing that I think about, and it just feels like holy in that sense. Like
it feels like it adds to the film. Right?
100%. So I would 100% recommend that. I have another tidbit, but I'll explain it after we go through the synopsis because it's like in line with the plot.
Yeah.
But we have, I guess I'll go ahead and explain this time since it was kind of my idea. I'll launch it. So this movie it follows this guy. His name is Ryu. He's deaf and he's like this labored employee. And he has a sister that suffers from a chronic illness that requires her to get a new kidney, essentially. He wants to do the transplant, but he's actually unable to because of conflicting blood types. He's B and she's A, I assume. So he has money saved away from his job to do the transplant, but because it's incredibly hard to find a suitable donor, it's just kind of like left for whatever. So like soon after that, to kind of top it all off, he loses his job. He kind of basically gets fired from the company, and seemingly out of options, Ryu goes to some underground organ dealers, and they make a deal that in exchange for the money that he saved up, as well as his own kidney, they'll exchange it for a kidney to suit his sister. It turns out that this was a scam, and they leave him penniless, naked, and missing a kidney. After that, back in the hospital miraculously finds a donor kidney for his sister, but Ryu, now broke, has no money for the operation. So he goes to his girlfriend, Young-mi, for guidance and help, and she kind of freaks out and beats the living shit out of him. But then she suggests to take some drastic measures and kidnap the daughter of the executive that fired him in the first place. Now, Young-mi is a bit of a radical, you can say. Bae-duna is an interesting figure in this movie.
Yeah.
So after basically convincing themselves to do it, they go ahead and basically stake out the executive and the daughter, and then go to carry out the plan. But after they run into some crazy event where another employee who was fired basically tries to commit suicide in front of him and an act against getting fired or whatever. So because of that, they have to change plans on the fly, and instead of kidnapping the executive daughter, they kidnapped the president's daughter that was with them at the time. So the plan is to exchange the daughter for ransom, and so Ryu fakes a letter that they kidnapped the daughter, which they did anyway, and then they send it to the father. So the father's name is Dongjin, and he goes through with it. He scrapes some money together and follows the arranged meeting time and drop off, kind of cooperating completely. At the same time that's going on, Ryu's sister, who's watching over the daughter, doesn't really know what's going on. She just figures that they're babysitting the president's daughter or something. But she pieces together the narrative after finding out that he gets fired through the separation papers.
Notice of termination.
She's like, "What's going on here?"
Fired.
So she pieces that together, and she realizes that she's part of this kidnapping scheme, all for her sake, apparently. So back in the drop-off situation, Ryu ties Dongjin to a pole and leaves him in a park stranded. And once he comes home with the money, he finds that his sister has actually committed suicide, wanting zero part in the scheme. And while Ryu's kind of distraught, he takes his sister and the daughter to this pond or river that they used to go as a kid, and then he goes to bury her there as this promise that they had when they were younger. So at this point, things get weird. While he's trying to bury the sister at this river, there's this local village guy who so many parallels. It's so weird. He's mentally handicapped, and he starts to interfere with the business that they're doing, and he basically gets shooed off by Ryu, and then he goes over to the other side with the daughter. What's her name? Yoon Soon. But basically, she's sleeping in the car, and the guy is trying to steal this homemade necklace that she has. And then she wakes up and freaks out and is not having any of that shit. And she tries to cry out for Ryu to get his attention. And so how it's kind of set up is that the car and where she is on the other side of the river, and Ryu's on the opposite side, and the only way to get there is between this man-made scrappy bridge. And so she tries to cross the bridge while getting his attention, but she ends up falling off of the bridge.
Yeah.
And because Ryu's deaf, he has no idea what's going on behind him. And by the time he realizes, it's already too late, and she's drowned in a river because she can't swim. And this kind of has a bit of shock for Ryu in the moment. And basically what he does, he doesn't even immediately chase after her, because we find out that he can't swim, and that he thinks that the river's too high, but that was because he was a kid, but it's actually shallow enough, he realizes. So he leaves the body on a bed of a rock to be discovered, and then we cut to Dongjin finding his daughter in the crime scene. And at that point, the narrative basically switches from Ryu to Dongjin, as he mourns and experiences trauma from losing his daughter. And basically he attaches himself to the investigation to find Ryu, and he finds that kind of leads him to they find the apartment that him and his sister were living in, and then that kind of leads to there's like the radio station, and basically the sister makes like a broadcast before she dies, coming clean with everything essentially. And then Dongjin, having listened to that, goes to the radio station to inquire about it. And then that in turn gives him a lead to go back to the river to find the sister's corpse, which he finds along with the village guy. And I guess he gets information from the village guy on like the license plate from the car that Ryu was driving. So while that is happening simultaneously, Youngmi and Ryu find the organ dealers that scammed him in the first place. And he goes to take revenge on them, and he basically murders all of them.
All of them, yeah.
Essentially. And so while he's doing that, Dongjin, with the information that he has, finds Youngmi's apartment and then knocks on the door. And basically he tortures her to death for information on where Ryu's whereabouts is.
Yeah.
And
electrifies her.
Some brutal stuff. And so once Ryu, so like the time is like, once Ryu finishes his revenge, and he gets injured in the process, but survives, he goes back to the apartment, but then finds that like it's police ridden and something's going down, and he finds the corpse to Youngmi, and there's like that little scene in the elevator. And so after that, they both stake each other's houses out, basically on like who's gonna go home first. And Ryu's the one who basically gives up first and goes back to where he lives. And he finds Dongjin sleeping inside of his apartment, but he was only pretending to do so. So when he like tries to barge in through the front door, he like wires it with electricity and basically captures him. So Dongjin kind of like revels in the moment of getting him, but ultimately decides to take him back to the river the next day, tie him up, and then basically murder him the same way that his daughter died, which is just drown him. So he cuts his Achilles heels, and he drowns on his own. And so Dongjin tries to basically get away with that. And like, I don't know if he was going to leave his body parts in the river or like bury it or something, but we kind of see him in the moment of doing that until he's visited by like this gang of guys who are terrorists or like anarchists. And it's like a callback to basically Youngmi wasn't bluffing when she said that if you kill me, my terrorist friends are basically going to find you and murder you because they have your picture now if something happens to me. And it wasn't a bluff. And they stabbed that guy to death.
Yep.
Pretty much. And then they leave him to die in the scene. And that's the ending of the film. So
it's interesting.
It's intense.
It's very intense.
It's intense. So you tell me, how did you kind of stumble upon this film? What's your experience like?
I think I watched it after I watched Old Boy.
Funny.
Yeah. So, I watched Old Boy. I enjoyed it a lot. Well, it was when like Old Boy was like really, really popping off, and a lot of people were like praising it.
Old Boy.
And
Old
so,
Boy.
but I didn't watch it when it first came out. I watched it actually like way later.
Okay.
But it was still like really popular and really especially like a lot of the scenes, and people were very like they liked very specific scenes within the movie, or specific moments of the movie. And I actually, the reason why I watched Old Boy was because there's an action scene in Old Boy that I really loved, that hallway scene where they fight in the hallway.
Iconic.
Yeah. And so that's the reason why I watched Old Boy. But after watching that, I kind of wanted to see what his other movies were about. And so I did watch the first one. And funny enough, I feel like there's a lot of similarities between this and Memories of Murder.
So many. It's like scary.
But it's interesting because like I feel like Memories of Murder has maybe almost like a bit more what's the word, like methodical way of like intellectual yeah it's more intellectual in a sense, where I feel like this movie is a little more emotional in the way that it's told.
Yeah.
And it's very funny and it's very interesting because They're both very gritty and like very like
Yeah.
very rough and hard to watch. Right, it's not an easy watch. But they they feel very similar too in the way that they're kind of told.
Yeah.
And even the last scene where you just see Song Kang-ho like looking back at the car.
Yeah.
Almost looks like the ending scene of like when he's looking at the looking at the screen, like looking back at the audience.
They're both like empty in that same
yeah, that
way.
empty feeling is kind of there. It's kind of interesting. But yeah, like there is that nuance there, I feel like, where one's a little more intellectual. It feels, for me at least, a little more intellectual, while this one feels a little more emotional.
You know what it feels like? It's like they were pitched the same idea. And like, you know how there's like that saying or whatever, like, I bet you if you gave the same script to like 5 different directors, like
it'd all be different.
It'd all be different.
Yeah.
This is what that feels like.
Yeah.
Like they were both handed the same like script, and then they just both put their own spin on it.
Yeah, it's kind of like that. It's very uncanny, but it's very like fun to watch because of that. Knowing and having watched like the other film too, I'm just kind of like seeing the comparisons. But in terms of like a revenge movie, I feel like it has a lot of similarities with A Bittersweet Life, the movie that we watched as well. Yeah. In terms of just its basic structure of revenge and like how like revenge like comes back full circle.
100%.
Like it's like exactly the same
100%.
in terms of that like plot point, right?
Yeah.
And I feel like this movie did it better, like
Agreed.
in the way that it utilized the full circle. I feel like it did better.
It was more clear, and just like the film itself is so much more like entertaining, and like I found myself more engaged.
Well, I thought both were entertaining, but I feel
my
like,
opinions are in that episode.
but I do think that this film does a better job of like laying down the steps to understanding every point, whereas I felt like A Bittersweet Life had a few like not necessarily plot holes, but like a few moments where I felt like they either should have fleshed it out more or they just should have just gotten rid of, right?
Yeah.
And so that's why I feel like they did it better here. And obviously they're different revenge stories, but I think the basic like plot, like a through line of it is the same. So that's why I'm mentioning it.
Right.
And that's why I just thought it was kind of interesting to see and to
Yeah. It's funny that you say that, because I was thinking about that like today when I was just kind of going through the movie and all the notes and stuff in my head. I was like trying to figure out like, I don't know, what I kind of thought of what the movie was trying to say. And basically like it's what you said, that really the movie is kind of saying nothing more than like revenge being a full circle, and like violence.
It always comes back, right?
Right. Like, violence breeds more violence and all those things. Like it's a very broad and like straightforward theme and like message, and it's not really saying anything else, funny enough. But like it is a very good movie and story. But it just like, I was thinking of in the way that it feels flat a little bit, in the sense that like, we're not really spending a lot of times with the characters individually. And like the reason that maybe that theme and message comes out the way it does is because the movie is really kind of focused on like beats and like the pacing, and it just goes from like one event to the other. Like it's very almost plot driven versus like
character driven.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's interesting because this film, a lot of times you almost feel like a fly on the wall in one sense, where like you're not so invested in the characters. Like you're not like, obviously you care about the characters in certain ways, but I don't think you're invested in the kind, like the camera placement and the way that they use the camera and the way that they do that doesn't make you like, they don't put you like literally in the shoes of the character, right? Yeah. Whereas like I feel like in A Bittersweet Life, they use the camera in such a way where you're kind of one with like the main character, right? The protagonist. Right. You're like walking with the protagonist. You're with the protagonist almost every single time.
Exactly.
Whereas this film, it's like you're with you in the beginning, and then it switches to Dongjin later on. Yeah. And it's pretty rare for you to see the main character coming in like way later, right? Yeah. And I really like that about this film because it's not afraid to do that. It's not afraid to be like, you know, Ryu is obviously one of the main characters, but usually when you watch a movie, like they are not, they're scared to put a main character that late because that means that you don't have the level of investment in that character because, you know, they're just not there, right? You just don't see them until later. And so having the confidence to know that this story is not necessarily about an individual person, but it's more about the theme and the story itself is really like he understands what he's trying to do, like what he wants to get out of this film, and that it's not necessarily like a character piece, but it's about the themes and the story, and obviously about revenge.
100%. Like you said, it works really great because like the movie has a clear identity, and like obviously Park Chan-Wook had a clear vision and he ran with it and like really stuck to his guns 100% on the movie. And like I said, everything supports like that one theme of like revenge and showing like, you know, what that breeds and what that's about and like why it's bad or something. And so we're not really finding ourselves to be invested in the characters too much. We're more of like watching the sequence of events and like how things play out, and it's really just all about how things play out at the end of the day, right?
And I really loved how this movie really shows you everything but what like we really want. Like it plays with you in the sense that like a lot of times within the scene like something big is happening, but he never shows it. Like it's always off screen, right? Like it's all, you hear the sound of it, but you never actually see what's going on or something like that, right? And I really like that approach because it engages the audience to like want to know what's going on exactly, right? A lot of times, like for example, Ryu goes to the he goes to get his revenge on the organ sellers, the dealers, and he goes in and like he bashes one guy's head in, and then he goes, and then the woman is sitting in the chair and like she walks up with the knife, but you never see her like stabbing him, or you never see what's like going on, like what happens there. But it later on it just cuts to Ryu like holding his stomach and he's like bleeding out, right? And you infer and you like, you know, but like at that moment the audience wants to see that, right? You want to see that happening, but he doesn't give you that because he knows that that's exactly what you want and what you're curious about, and you really, your imagination will do better than what he can show you. And that's just one example, but he does that numerous times within the film. Like for example, when the girl drowns, right, and she's just like kind of floating, but you never really get a full like
of
view.
Like that moment of
there's
her
like
dying,
one shot of like her just underwater, like a split second, and then like she's just kind of like on there near the rock or whatever, and you just see you like his reaction to that. And
same
like,
thing with the sister, like
exactly,
you just like you get one scene that she figures out that something is up, and like, you know, she calls like the former employer to like kind of inquire,
right?
And then all of a sudden the next time we're back in the apartment, like
she's dead.
She's dead.
Like, and even how he shows the letter too, right? It's like two like sentence, like it's like the whole page has like it's a whole paragraph, right? But you only see like 2 words of the whole paragraph, and you just already get the sense of what's happening and like the urgency there, and like those things I feel like are really really well done in like drawing the audience's attention to wanting to know what that is, right? Because you're, as a human being, you're like, oh, what did she write exactly on the on the letter, right? You kind of want to know exactly what happened. And normally, I guess, you know, they would show you the whole thing because it's like a very shocking thing, right? Like she wrote a suicide letter, like you want to see the whole content of it, but you don't even need to show all that. And I think him doing that shows that he knows like the mind of the audience, or like understands like what the audience will be drawn towards, and how to almost manipulate the audience into being engaged in the movie. It
supports like what we said earlier of like we're not completely like we're really just being taken away from investment of the characters. Like he's showing us, you know, these scenes and he's like cutting them short, like just showing us enough to kind of like grasp what's going on, but not giving us enough to like relish or, you know, even like feel something with the character,
Right.
essentially. So he's just like, he's taking information away and it's distancing ourselves from like, you know, like the nuances and like the details and like the characters themselves. And it's just like, nope, here's what you need to know. Here's the next beat of like what's going to go on in the sequence of events.
Yeah.
Like I said, we never like, even for like once he discovers that his sister has committed suicide in the bath and like, you know, he like screams out and like cries. Like that's just like a quick cut, and then we're back into like the car. Like we're not there when he's feeling trauma, when he's like, feeling sad. And it's the same thing with Dongjing. Like we just get like a sliver of what goes on, but we're never like really there.
You don't relish in the moment of that emotion, right?
So we're constantly being distanced from like these very intimate moments.
Right, you're not in that moment. Like you're not given the time to like take in all the emotions. Which is funny because, you know, like I said that it feels like a very emotional movie. But yeah, it's interesting because it does do that. But I do still feel like it is a very like emotionally driven film.
Intense. That's because like it's intense. Like,
right, it is intense.
What is there and like what we're being shown is still like really extreme. Right, you know what I mean?
And the characters themselves I feel like are emotional.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
That's the thing, right? Yeah.
He said like, because I was reading in another interview, he was saying one of his main things that he wanted to get across to an audience was like he wanted people to like physically feel what's going on.
Yeah.
You know, like probably rather than emotionally.
Yeah.
He wanted like people to like physically feel like the pain and like the acts of vengeance that were going on between the characters. And I think that was really well accomplished. Yeah. Versus anything else.
Because I feel like sometimes the relishing in the moment. And like, you know, like for example, let's say for example that moment when she when Ryu's sister committed suicide and she figures it out, he goes into the bathroom and like he's like hugging her, right? Hugging her head or whatever. Like it could have been a moment where he like really like embellished it, right? And like really made it something that we as the audience can like connect with emotionally and like I guess like suck it for all it's worth, right? That moment for all it's worth. But by not doing that, or by doing that, it kind of gives us an attachment to the character. But then when he doesn't do that, it allows us to kind of think about like the things around it, right? And kind of understand like, okay, so what is like the bigger picture of what's going on here? So
exactly. Yeah, and like I think like we're not supposed to take sides with anybody either.
Yeah.
Because like obviously we're, you know, in the beginning we're following Ryu for like basically like for a full hour, like half the film, and then it switches to Dongjing for like the last hour with a little bit of duality. But like I said, we're not really supposed to take sides with either party. Like we're supposed to see what happens in a very like neutralistic perspective,
right? Like a fly on the wall.
Yeah, exactly. Like, because we at some point you feel sympathy for Ryu, what's happening, and at other times you're like, well, that was like not right, you know. And then the same thing with like Dongjin. Like, sometimes you feel sympathy because he just lost his daughter, but at other times you're like knowing the events that happened that led to that, you know. And it's like, oh, you know, it kind of feels justified why he's taking revenge. Yeah. Like we're constantly having sort of.
There's no right and wrong here, right?
Exactly.
Well, there is, but like they're all wrong.
They're all wrong.
They're all wrong.
Everything that happened was nah.
Right.
But yeah, but like that's, you know, that was all supporting that. Like if we're staying with Ryu in those moments and we're like embellishing in the moments that he's, you know, in pain or like whatever, like in glory or whatever, we're just gonna like naturally side with him.
Yeah.
Like that's not the purpose.
Right.
Of, like, this
yeah.
movie.
He doesn't give you an opportunity to do that.
And even with like, I feel like that was really hard to accomplish with Dongjin specifically because he's such a like victim of like, especially when he's introduced. And like he did a really good job of even just kind of distancing us from his character at the end of the day. And then like really seeing like, oh, you know, he was kind of this victim and then he turns into this vigilante almost at the end of it. and then we can kind of see like the ugly side of his character, you know, in a very like objective way.
Yeah.
So that's what I was thinking a lot before, was just being introduced to Dongjin in the beginning, like when he finds his daughter laying on the rock, and then the only scene that we see him emotionally crying out is like there, but it's like this extremely wide shot of the entire crime scene.
Yeah.
And then you just hear him in the background, like this little fly, you know.
That's the thing, right? If he had the intention of making it an emotional scene, you'd be right next to him, right?
Exactly.
You'd be in the moment. You'd have this like close up of his face and him crying, and you'd have a close up of the baby and going back and forth, and you'd have that as like a whole emotional scene. But yeah, like you said, it's this wide shot across the river, like people are just doing their work, doing their job, you know, at the crime scene, and you hear him like crying a little bit. And there's like that split second of him like close up, and then we're back to the
like,
wide.
Yeah, it's an interesting way that he did it. Like even thinking, so one of my favorite shots is in the what's it called, the autopsy. It's like the only like intimate moment we have is it's just that close up of the autopsy on his daughter, and he's there in the room, and then like you hear the sounds of what's going on. He's just like internally breaking down, and you feel for him in that moment. And then cut to later, once he finds his sister's body, we're back in that room, but he's just like
he's yawning.
He's yawning. It's just like,
I love that juxtaposition.
It's another day in the office kind of deal, and it really just subverts what you felt in the beginning in a way. You're like, oh, now this is he's basically just a different character entirely at that
point.
Like
who he cares about just changes the way that he is in that room.
Yeah. So I was like, just really powerful, like really, really cool.
Yeah, it's such a great juxtaposition there. Yeah, I really agree.
But on that note, any other favorite moments? Anything that really kind of calls out to you in this film?
Yeah.
Scenes?
You know, surprisingly, this film really doesn't have a lot of dialogue.
I was going to say that. I think for like all intents and purposes, it's almost a silent film because of the lack of dialogue.
They could have it silent, and there would be no problem watching the film.
Exactly.
And I think that's a mark of a good film, to be honest. They use the film as a medium really well.
This is basically what, when you're in film school and your professors are like, show, don't tell. Like the golden rule. Like this movie is really the golden example of that.
Yeah, I agree, because so many times, you know, they don't have to say much, right? You already understand what's going on. Like, I think Park Chan-wook is like really a master of like duality or like complete opposites. Yeah. Like, for example, when they're in the house and the sister is like crying out in pain in the other room, like there's these guys masturbating, right?
Yeah.
To the sound of her moaning. And then it's just like that like opposite, like, and the way that you can perceive one thing and how another person can perceive another thing, and he just constantly does that throughout the film, right? Like that whole juxtaposition in the autopsy room is like a perfect example of that, where like, you know, at one moment you can completely be sad because of this character who's mourning for his daughter, and then another moment the dude's yawning because, you know, he happened to find the sister, right? He didn't even he just stumbled upon it because he was throwing rocks in the river, and you know, he has like no sympathy for that you know, sister. But just stuff like that is just really, you know, well done, I think, in like showing that. But like you mentioned, like favorite scene, I think one of my favorite scene is when Dongjin takes Yu into the river. And he's about to kill him, but he says like, "You're a nice person, right? So you understand even if I kill you."
Right.
I love that scene. I love that dialogue, and I love that scene because it's just like, it kind of sums up like
everything.
Yeah.
I mean, like, it's really vocalizing your entire thoughts. You're like, who's in the wrong here? Kind of nobody, strangely enough. Yeah. But at the same time, kind of everybody.
And like, I'm still going to do what I have to do or what I want to do, right?
Yeah.
Because this is how I feel.
Yeah.
Like,
it's inevitable.
Yeah, right. And that's what he's basically saying. He's like saying, I understand, you know, what's going on with you. Like, I understand your situation, that your sister, you know, died, committed suicide, and that you needed money and that all of that. I understand all of that. Like, I get it. but my daughter's dead, and I still have to kill you. You know, you understand where I'm coming from, right?
Yeah.
Like that's like literally what he's saying, but in like one sentence, and it's just like perfect.
Yeah. Yeah, and he, like Udu's reaction too, and he's just like trying to kind of sympathize to get through with him, but like it just all leads you down to like this one path at the end of the day, you know? And it's like, yeah, it's futile. We know it's gonna get here. What do you think of like the ending after? So I totally forgot of like the actual ending when the terrorist guys come up and then murder him. I actually totally forgot that that's how the movie ended, and it just kind of goes full circle. It's like it feels like it goes back to like a surrealistic kind of feeling for the movie, you know, like here and there the movie kind of plays with like more surreal elements per se, and like that's kind of what it kind of goes back to.
Well, for that scene, for me, I was thinking a lot about, like I talked about before, a bittersweet smile and a bittersweet life.
Smile.
Yeah, a bittersweet life, and how, you know, even there at the end, it's like, you know, the arms dealer's brother comes and he kills the main character.
Right.
And it's basically the same here if you think about it, right? Like
it's true.
A third party comes in and basically kills the protagonist.
It's just like a final nail in the coffin to like the theme. You know?
And I was wondering why it worked or it felt better here than in A Bittersweet Life. And I think it's because of the way that the whole film was shot, and the progress, the pacing of it, right? And how they introduced the characters, or how they introduced the characters. And because the film in this story, a lot of the characters, like we know them, but we don't really know them, and that goes on like constantly with all of the characters. And so when the gang, right, when the terrorists or whatever, when the gangs came to kill the main character here, Dongjin here, like it kind of felt like, oh wow, like, oh, this is inevitable, like like the thing that Youngmi said is not right. Of course, it's the payoff, right? That little seed paid off at the end, and I think that's why it felt like a very satisfying thing. Whereas in A Bittersweet Life, like you kind of get introduced to the character, but because it's such a character-driven story, like you don't have a chance to get invested in that character, like the arms dealer's brother, right? Like you get introduced to him, and you kind of think of him as, okay, he might be some important character, but all you get of him basically is him going to his arms dealer's brother's place and figuring it out, and then later on he just kills him, right? And it doesn't feel as like earned, whereas in this film, like there is no moment to be earned. Like there's nothing to be earned because all the characters kind of have that in them, where it's like
there's the same level of as we know them,
right? Same level of objectivity, right? There's no like subjective like emotional investment that we have in all of the characters. They're kind of evenly, distributed. Whereas in Bittersweet Life, it's like you're supposed to be really intensely invested in characters, right? And so
it's because we've been like with the main character for so long. Like having a third party that we really have no connection to whatsoever, taking the life of the protagonist, we feel like, oh, that was cheap on the protagonist's part.
It kind of feels cheap, right? Like he was already dying and like you just killed him. It kind of felt cheap. And so I think that's the difference. And like the payoff of it here was a lot lower. The stakes were a lot lower in Mr. Vengeance. Whereas the stakes in A Bittersweet Life was a lot higher in terms of like him being the one to kill.
No, I see exactly what you're saying. Because like here, like even though we didn't know the terrorists at all, like they were just a brand new third party that came by. Because of the connection with Youngmi, like we knew like Youngmi was on the same playing field of like
character
like investment with Dongjin and Ryu. And so like once like her Vengeance was paid off, it felt justified, like, oh, like like
of course that character has another
we felt like kind of grateful, like, oh, like she was avenged, awesome kind of, you know, because we still had a level of investment towards her,
Right.
you know. So it's like I said, it's kind of like evenly spread that we are invested in everybody,
Right.
and even though everybody dies, it feels like we're like justified in everybody being killed.
And them coming isn't like, oh, they're a completely new party. They're
Right.
like a surrogate for
exactly,
Youngmi, right?
Yeah,
It's not like they're just random people.
Yeah.
They're called because of Youngmi, right?
exactly. And that's why it feels like a great payoff because the way that they sell it, in backtracking into the scene of their interrogation, it's like, oh, she's definitely calling a bluff. Like she's trying, like we know her as a radical. Like I felt like that's a bluff on her part for sure. Like she's just trying to cover her ass and maybe get through it. And then Dongjin just being full deep into whatever kills her anyway.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, fine. And then once it turns out to be legit at the end, it's like, like that's cool.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, okay.
Whereas in A Bittersweet Life, the arms dealer is like, who cares about the arms dealer?
It's just a bad guy. Like,
yeah, it's just a dude.
Yeah.
Right? That's the difference, I think. Right?
100%. Yeah. No, that's a good point. So yeah, it's kind of funny. It's just like, oh, like Ryu dies, it's like, oh, justified for sure for Dongjin. And then like Dongjin dies, it's like, oh, definitely justified for like Youngmi.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, and that's the point of the story is like, you know, revenge begets revenge.
Exactly. Like the point is, like it's not good for anybody. You know, like it's all just gonna be, like it's just consistently bad. Like
it's just gonna be a shitty day for everyone. No one wins.
No one wins. Yeah. So on that note, actually, I really like the elevator shot a lot when so Ryu comes back, and then he's like, "What's going on?" And he goes up to the apartment, and then he's escorted out, or he like tries to flee back in the elevator, and then the detectives walk in the elevator, and it's like super intense. Like, this is the guy you're looking for, and then he just happens to be right next to Youngmi's corpse.
Yeah.
Like, I really like how that one all played out. I think I had one more. Oh yeah, I thought this was really smart though. Was like, so once we get introduced to Youngmi, so Ryu goes over to her apartment, and they're talking, but like the blocking of it is like there's a mirror like in front and like behind the camera, and I just thought it was really cool to see, like, because obviously he's deaf and they know they communicate through ASL, so it's like you don't really naturally, like, you want both of them in the frame, but they're talking, so they'd have to be looking at each other, or like Ryu has to be looking at her obviously to talk, but there's a mirror in front, so they can both be looking at the camera and still communicate, and so we, as an audience, we both see them like fully as they talk and expressions. Versus, like, say they were profile and looking at each other and we have, like, a level of disconnect. I just thought it was really smart, like, how he was able to play that scene out.
Right. They don't have to cut to two different shots, right?
Yeah.
They're all in one frame.
Like, I mean, like, there was nothing, like, essentially special going on in that. Because it was, like, right when they first met.
Yeah.
And they were really just talking about nothing. Because they were talking about, like, I heard that story of that guy that has two heads. And then he, like, shot himself in one of the heads to kind of like, or he had a headache, so to get rid of the migraine.
Oh yeah.
So it was just kind of like a throwaway dialogue scene, but it was just the way that we were able, like, I was able to kind of see them and see how they communicate without it being.
I'm sure, like, there's a reason why he did that.
Probably.
I'm just trying to think about what might be the reason.
But smart use of a mirror, like 100%. I was like, oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Because I found myself like, what are they looking at? Because like they're both looking forward into the lens.
Yeah, mirror.
Right, but the second watch through, I was like,
well, I think it's interesting because in the beginning, you don't see their face. It's just the mirror covers the shot.
Exactly, because you're behind the mirror.
Yeah, you're behind the mirror, and they're talking, and you don't see their face. That's another example of like him not showing you and giving you like a desire to want to know who they are, right? Like he does that constantly in the movie.
Yeah,
where like he's teasing you and he's like, yeah, like, something interesting's going on, but you can't see it. And then when he kind of finally shows you, you're like, okay, that's kind of interesting.
That's cool. It's kind of neat.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I thought that was pretty cool. So this is my second time watching the film. So when I first watched it, I've only seen it one other time, obviously. And it was like, I think right when The Handmaiden came out. I saw it when, I think it was like 2016. I saw it when it came out in theaters. It got like a very limited run. This is when I was living in Jacksonville, Florida at the time. So I saw it at like my favorite art house theater. And after watching that movie, I was like, I should really go back and watch Park Chan-wook's other films. And I think I started with Oh Boy as well. and then I went back and watched Sympathy for Mr.Vengeance. And yeah, I mean, like my feelings are pretty much consistent with how I watched it first time, which was like straight morbidness, really. And it's like kind of hard to watch, especially on your first time. But it's funny watching it now, kind of like, especially knowing who the actors are. Like I totally forgot Sang-ho was in this movie, and I was like, oh, that guy's like huge. But at the time, like I really wasn't aware with, you know, like the actors and like, you know, their kind of status. Like Bae Doona's amazing, and so I was really excited to kind of see her. And even like Ryu, he's really big.
Yeah.
Shin Ha-kyung.
Yeah.
So they're all kind of like babies in this film. But there was a few other things in like the movie itself that I picked up, which I had forgot. Like one, I kind of like we talked about it being like a very silent film. I thought that was really neat. There was a whole like thinking about memories of murder. There's so many like strange parallels, like even between like the village kid and just like being a murder case and like all that. There's some like weird. I have some nitpicks with this movie though. I really do have some nitpicks with it. Like another thing that I didn't realize was Dongjin kills the delivery guy. So like the guy that delivers the food at the apartment. There's like a quick shot of.
Wait, did he die?
Yeah,
oh, I missed it.
That's what I'm saying.
Oh.
It's like a quick shot, but once the dude goes back to the apartment, they escalate somebody out of the apartment in the bed, and it's a quick like top down shot of the delivery guy.
Oh.
And I was like,
right. It has to be some other person because
he has to see young me in the thing.
Young Me's
in the elevator.
In the elevator.
But I was like, so that was one thing that I realized. I was like, oh, he actually killed that guy. Which like, I guess that makes sense. But also like in the scene, how would he have seen? Like it didn't seem clear like he was a witness to it, you know? So the fact that he killed him was like, why?
Right. It's never given you any context.
Right. And so that quirk kind of like quarrels with other things that I felt about the movie. So let me see what I got. So one is like when they're staking each other out. Ryu's staking out Dongjin's home, and there's like he pees in like the bottle.
Yeah, the bottle.
And he leaves it outside of his car. Yeah. Like you can't like you're giving yourself away
because of his urine.
Like it's outside of the car door, like but like nothing funny is going on.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like throw it in the backseat or something. That was one thing. Two is
I think I can give that a pass. Come on, man.
Come on, like,
it's more of an artistic, sensibility.
It's like it's there for comical,
kind of,
but like legitimately, come on.
I mean,
like throw it under the car.
Come on, think about it though. Would he really care that there's a bottle of urine just chilling there?
I mean, given that like Dongjin like basically knows what like he knows what's like who to look for, what's going on. Yeah. So like if you're coming back home and you see a strange car sitting there and like two bottles, like Dongjin's no stupid head, you know what I mean? Like obviously the guy's smart.
I think that's more of like he didn't anticipate staying there that long.
Right.
That's why he did that. Not like
but still like
I don't think he would have done that if like
right.
Because he leaves by the end after the second bottle.
Yeah, but still,
the first bottle's there for a while, but the second bottle.
Wait, so like as soon as he sees Dongjin's car comes up, he'd be like, "Get the bottle off the ground really quick."
Nah, he's just
like, "Oops, let me not get."
No, it's just Gatorade. It's just Gatorade, man.
Golden Gatorade.
Yeah, man.
It's like apple juice.
It's the lemon Gatorade.
Damn. Another core was like the injury that you had when he gets stabbed with the scalpel. Like that's a severe injury, you know, and like it's staying persistent throughout, even after the fact. But do you think in what world that he'd still be able to operate like a day after suffering from that kind of gash? Like he gets stabbed and he's clearly like.
Well, it depends on how deep the wound.
That thing was deep though.
He
was bleeding out.
Maybe it was from the extra blood was from his kidney thing.
And he's missing a kidney. Come on, like
you never know.
You would have been like out cold at least by that night. You know,
it is what it is. Maybe that adrenaline kicked in.
I was like, that guy was pushing something. You know,
I mean, maybe he took the drug that woman
took some
taking,
coke
yeah.
to like, keep him going.
Yeah. Why am I defending this movie?
Okay. I guess this is kind of passable, but I was like, how did you sister truly not know anything was weird going on, like any fun business, especially when you like starts taking pictures of the girl crying, like that's a random thing to do.
Yeah.
You know. There's actually kind of like a little inconsistency here, which is the picture that he takes, right? Yeah. She doesn't have the necklace on because he exchanged the necklace after the fact. But the picture that Dongjin receives, she's wearing the necklace.
Maybe she had two.
But you gotta show that.
Yeah.
You gotta show that. So there's a little what is that? Consistency. I forgot the word. I can't think of it right now. Inconsistency. Another one. Oh yeah. So the old guy that sits on the couch outside that he like keeps putting up the pants for. What is the purpose of that? Why is that even there?
Just to show the situation at hand.
What situation?
The man needs help. The man needs help.
There was zero reason.
Sometimes you don't put things in the movie for there to be a specific purpose per se, but
is that just to show that he's like a good guy? Like he's like
to bring, to kind of set the stage, set the scene and kind of show you the world and kind of help you understand what's going on and the people there. And like, and remember to save the cat. Just if you help a person, you're automatically likable in the mind of the audience.
Okay, kind of fair. But I mean,
it just shows that he's not the worst person ever, right?
Yes.
He's a deaf dude, but he's willing to help another man who
That's
has
what I'm saying.
issues.
There's so many other points that automatically give him like likable pass.
Well, I think it's just adding another dimension, like he's just some random dude in the and it's more, I think when I was watching that scene, it wasn't more like some random dude he's never seen before, but it's a man who he does it for every day, right?
Right.
He goes there, the man always has his pants down, he puts it back up and he goes along with his way. Yeah.
But still, like in the grand scheme of things, it's like even to the point of how tight this movie is.
And you're showing the routine, right? Like that's what he does every time, and then later on that scene comes back again, but the old man has nobody to help his pants. There ain't pants no person to have have his pants up. So
commando all the time.
It shows you, like there is this missing person there. He is no longer there.
We need you in this man's life.
Yeah, and he's not there anymore. How sad must he be? Like it's perfect.
No one's gonna feed the cat.
Yeah.
Damn. But
makes sense though. Yeah,
it's whatever.
It's not significant in the grand scheme of things, but I think it's still a nice little thing. Is what I'm trying to say.
Sure. It's nice. Fine. That's what you shoot to like make time.
Dude, it's like 5 seconds. Come on. It's not even like padding. It's not really even padding.
It's whatever. We can fight about it all day, but at the end of the day, it's there. And then the other thing is how they actually kidnap the daughter remains a mystery.
Yeah,
like she just ends up at the house. They're like randomly playing at the park all of a sudden. Like how exactly did?
That's like
I guess that goes along with your earlier point.
What I was talking about. Yeah, it never tells you exactly what they did. Right?
Yeah, it just kind of happens.
Which is what you want to see, right? You want to see how they kidnap the person and all of that jazz, all the action, the media action. But he's like, nah, that ain't for you. That's for your imagination, not for you.
Just accept it.
Yeah,
it just so happens to be that way. So fine, I guess fine, but that one bothers me. Out of all the other choices made, I think that one kind of bothers me a little bit.
I mean, it's a valid. I think it's valid. Yeah. But I also think that
it works though.
Yeah, it works.
I mean, like it still flows fine.
And I think the way that it's shot and the way that it's edited, if it had that, I mean, I don't think it would be like bad, but I think that the way that it is edited, it's kind of nice to not have that because he's been doing that the whole time. Like that's the style of the film already. So I don't think it's like necessarily a negative, but I think that even if it wasn't, it wouldn't be bad.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
It also might feel like time consuming too, though. Like
right.
if you shoot like the whole heist kidnapping part of it, it feels like it might take away from.
But do you really need to know the logistics?
Well, obviously not.
Exactly.
You know, like sure you prove your point there, but
And also it's kind of like you kind of wonder like, okay, what happened that makes, because like a kid isn't necessarily like sad or crying, right? She's kind of very chill at the house. And it kind of makes you wonder, okay, maybe like they didn't necessarily like kidnap her like in the sense of like putting like a bag over her head. But it's more like convincing her, like persuading her, like with like hey, I got candy.
I'm your uncle.
Yeah, exactly.
You haven't met me.
So that's basically probably what they did, right?
Right.
And they also lied to her, right?
Yeah.
Saying that her mother you says, oh, don't talk to her.
But that was a lie for the sister.
Yeah, for the sister, obviously,
yeah.
But like it's still kind of part of the whole thing where like you know he's trying to
keeping them both in the dark.
Keep them both in the dark and kind of do that.
Which that I had to rewatch. That was like I don't know, like even like logic thing. I had to rewatch that scene to be like to get the full idea of what was going on, because it's a little hard for to tell that the sister was left in the dark up until like she kills herself and you're like, oh, she's finding some things out.
Yeah.
Like even then I'm like, how much is the sister on it or not on it?
Yeah, she didn't know anything.
She didn't know anything.
Jack.
But having to go back and like, oh, like she told or Ryu told his sister a lie and then is trying not to say it so that way the daughter doesn't be like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
My parents are just divorced.
Yeah.
She ain't dead.
Yeah.
So, but it took a second for me to kind of catch on to that point. Nonetheless, solid film. I really like this one. Like I said, it's really morbid. It's tough to watch the first time, but I definitely learned a lot. Definitely learned it my second time.
Yeah, I mean, it's not gonna get any better.
That's what I was saying. I hope you have not weak stomachs going forward. Try to eat dinner before, or just before. You probably won't be able to eat after. Because Old Boy is, I guess, worse. Maybe.
It depends on how you see it,
I guess. More shocking worse.
More shocking, but I don't think it's necessarily
explicit.
Like worse.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not as like gory.
Yeah, exactly.
But
yeah, this one's definitely like explicit and like showing its actions. But
that's funny because you're like, oh, it doesn't show anything.
The duality,
right? But I think that also has a lot to do with like our imagination too.
Right. Yeah.
Because like our imagination starts filling in the holes.
Yeah. But like I said, like he gives you just enough of like haunting images.
Yeah.
Like the shot of the daughter just like quickly like floating in the water.
Or even like the doll. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
In the fire and stuff like that. Kind of
something's just changed.
It's not necessarily like repulsive, but it's like very eerie and almost like, oh man, that kind of feels.
Yeah, it's just like it stays with you. Like you get a quick glance and
it's almost haunting.
Yeah.
And that like split scene where like Dongjin, when the daughter comes in the house, he's like he's like laying on the couch, and then daughter pops out of nowhere.
Oh
the drowned daughter. Like his imagination, he's like hallucinating or whatever.
That's what I'm saying. Like he definitely plays with surreal elements. Like very briefly, and that's consistent with all of this.
And the interesting part is when the detective, the police detective, comes to his house.
Yeah,
then the water's there.
Yeah,
it's like
whoa! Dun, dun, dun. Dun, dun, dun.
Haunted.
You know what happened? He slipped into the multiverse in Memories of Murder, where he wasn't actually a detective, and so that's why when he came back, he was like full detective mode. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He was like laser focused. I'm gonna find you. I'm gonna fuck him up. That's what happened. I'm telling you.
Yeah. I like it.
Those guys are in on it. Bong Joon-ho and Park Chan-Wook. But yeah. What do you think? I mean, you've seen all of the films that we're talking about, right? Where does this kind of
I'll make my decision after. Yeah.
I'm interested. I'll say like I'll question. I'm interested to where particularly the Handmaiden places on your list. I think. Like I feel like mutually like sympathy for Lady Vengeance is bottom. But I'm interested.
Why mutually? I didn't say anything about it.
If you think it's like much better, I would be shocked.
Handmaiden I watched once.
Okay.
And when I first watched it, I liked it. But
yeah,
I don't know. It depends how high or low. I'll have to watch it again to make that decision. But I do remember watching it and enjoying it.
Yeah. Really, like, for all these movies, I've only seen them, like, once or twice.
Yeah, me too.
I think The Handmaiden is the one I've seen the most. But all other three of them I've seen.
I only watched all of them once.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
even Oldboy once.
Same.
I saw the fight scene like multiple times.
Yeah,
but
I mean that can't be.
I was like, "Yo, this is great."
that can't be helped. But the whole thing as an entirety. Yeah.
And it's not something that you want to watch like
exactly. You don't want to. It's for special occasions like this. You don't want to go back. Same thing for Sympathy, Vengeance. I'm like, I'm not gonna go back and.
It's not something that you're like actively wanting to watch because it's such a great movie.
Yeah.
Like not great, like fun movie.
Yeah.
It's not a fun movie.
I don't feel about this movie like I feel about Story of Yonosuke, guys.
Right. But like definitely academically, I would watch it more.
But for self pleasure.
But like emotionally, it's not always like it doesn't put you in the best of places usually.
Exactly. Yeah.
But it is a great film.
Yeah.
Yeah. I kind of chose my words wrong before, but yeah, it's a good film.
Yeah. So next week will be Oldboy. I mean, you haven't seen it, man. You've been living under a rock.
Yeah, man with a hammer.
With a hammer.
Yeah.
Hammer man.
Yep.
Hammer man with no tongue.
With the
spoilers.
With that disheveled hair. That crazy man hair.
That was pre-Lee.
No.
Lee's bedhead. Yeah, I'm interested to see this movie. I'm really actually interested to see kind of what I think about this movie again. It's been so long. It's really been so long. But yeah, so it should be exciting. I'm not really sure where people can go see that one. Good luck.
2000s Korean movies were popping off, dude.
Yeah. Well, like, Park Chan-Wook is really probably like the most prominent figure in, like, this was kind of.
And Bong Joon-ho.
And Bong Joon-ho. Like, this was kind of, like, what? Like, South Korean, like, new wave cinema. Like, this is when, like, they're modern and, like, they really popped off, like, in media in general. And so, like,
to be honest, they're still popping off now.
Yeah, like, it's really, it's
like,
only gone up.
It's only, like, gotten, like, crazier because, like, people, I think, now it's more, back then it was more, like, of a new wave, like,
exactly.
More, but it was not as mainstream, but now it's, like, very mainstream, right? Like with like Squid Game and all that. Like people are just like going crazy over Korean Korean like film or like Korean TV shows and stuff like that.
Because like before like 2000s, I mean there wasn't really much going on a global scale.
Yeah.
Maybe not even. I mean I can't speak for like nationally, but
nationally, I mean like it was popping off, right?
But then like once the 2000s hit, like now we have all these directors making films that are making huge waves in festivals, and the festivals is giving access to eyes globally and everywhere, and
it's also just a more connected world, right?
Exactly,
compared to 2000s.
That's true.
So that's also another thing,
but yeah, like it kind of started with like a film community mainly, just like cinema and like cinema heads and such, and then now with like really streaming, I think has done it for today,
right?
With like
the convenience of just
television and dramas. Yeah. And so now it's like it's gone from kind of like a niche like into a cinema world to just a media world in general. Because it's like not only television, it's music, it's like idols, it's all these things that are kind of hitting it. So in one little small country is making it big.
Yeah.
I mean, I got their phone.
I mean, to be honest, not everything that comes out of Korea is like great.
Sure.
There are a lot of flops too, in Korean film.
But I mean, undeniably, like definitely.
But I do think that the ability for Korea to make good films, there's a higher chance for Korean movies to be good than for Hollywood movies to be good these days. I feel like.
Right.
It's kind of sad, but
Yeah. What do you think that is? Like, is it just like craving something new? Like Hollywood is doing Hollywood. Like
Hollywood
we know that formula.
Maybe, but it's also because I feel like Korea, like as of now at least, has they're more willing to take risks.
Sure.
In terms of cinema, like in terms of films and new films and things that they haven't seen before. Whereas I feel like Hollywood really cannot or does not want to take risk at all.
Yeah.
And they're really focused on nostalgia and also remakes and securing the money, right? Securing and making sure that money is happening. Whereas I feel like in Korea, they still want the money, obviously, but they kind of know that or understand fundamentally that if there is something new and interesting and good and great, and if that pops off, then they'll make money, right? Yeah. And I think that's a little bit of a difference. Hollywood is so like stuck in their ways, I feel like, which is why I really think that A24 and really companies like that really are pushing the boundaries. More than Hollywood, right? And they're still kind of pushing and taking risks. Like even if you look at films like The Green Knight and all the other movies that they endorse, like The Lighthouse and stuff like that, it really shows you that they have a different approach to how they pick their films compared to Hollywood.
I mean, A24 specifically is pushing cinema as like an art versus a product.
Yeah,
whereas
exactly.
Hollywood is the opposite, obviously.
Well, yeah, Hollywood is like, how much money can we make out of this? Whereas I feel like A24 focuses a little bit more on like the quality of the film and what it's trying to do as a film itself, right? Even when you watch a movie like Minari, right? It's like, that's like a completely niche film. Sure. Whereas like, I feel like Hollywood is like, there's so many bad films, right? Just objectively, it's just not good films, right? Like, it's just such a product.
They're just targeting film. Like entertainment and like pizzazz.
Like, for example, I didn't even watch it, but like Space Jam 2. Come on. Like it's completely like, you know, a product of nostalgia and just going off the fame of a person. Yeah, which was, I mean, Space Jam 1 was like that too, but at least it was original.
At least it was the first of its kind, right?
Like, at least it was original. It was like, I love that film.
Space Jam is playing off like, you know, nostalgia of not only like, you know, Michael Jordan, like basketball and such, but just cartoons in general.
Right.
Mixing the worlds, kind of like.
And that was actually pretty like, you know, like inventive and refreshing. Yeah. Right.
But then the sequel is just, you're just playing on itself.
Right. It just doesn't work.
Exactly.
Like, they're missing the point of what Space Jam 1 was. And then like we're like going totally off topic here, but yeah.
But I was we'll save this for the Patreon type. that's what my mind just
Space Jam.
Space Jam. But yeah, I think like Korea is kind of riding the wave of best of both worlds in a sense, where, you know, obviously there's products and shows that are, you know, kind of, you know, doing it to make money. Like I see with dramas that there's a clear formula with, you know, with their shows and such.
Yeah.
But like in terms of, you know, some shows and even in terms of cinema, it's like, I think they have an awareness of making new products and being more open to experiment and be radical is pushing even just like expanding globally and like getting themselves out there. And, you know, like that goes hand in hand with making things that are more experimental and like, you know, being more open in that sense. So it's kind of like, you know, two hands are helping each other out in that sense.
Yeah, but you know, if you watch Korean cinema though, like there are rarely any sequels. Like I mean,
that's true.
To be honest, it's kind of worrisome in one sense because they are trying to do like a lot of sequel stuff
now.
Yeah, because I mean, it's not. Look, sequels aren't necessarily inherently bad, right? Like if you make a good sequel, it's a good sequel. It's not. It doesn't matter whether it's a sequel or not. Like because people are invested in characters, and if it's a good story,
right,
they would love it. Like I would love it. Like if it's a good story and good characters, and you continue it, in a very sensible way. But then
it's like
prime example, you know, Train to Busan and Peninsula, right? We watched it and. Objectively, Peninsula is not as good as Train to Busan, and like you have to wonder why, right? Like you have to wonder, like, okay, so like, why is Peninsula not as good? Yeah, and like we did talk about it back then when we reviewed Peninsula 2, but it's It's just like they're trying to chase the trend of Hollywood, and it really doesn't work.
Right. No, that's 100% true. And I mean, like you said, it can be a very scary place. And it just like comes down to like, what is your intention with it?
Mhm.
Like, are you doing it because you love the story, you love the characters, like this is something that's chaseable, and you have a world that you can expand in, or are you just doing it for like, this was now number one, blockbuster hit.
People and obviously pressure want more for people,
yeah. So now we're just chasing it because it's obviously gonna be another winner.
Right. Either way, it'll make money, which is what they think, right?
Exactly.
And then like it might, but it doesn't mean that it's gonna be good.
Yeah, like it's the quality goes down in that sense, objectively, So it's like doing that. Like I think in the opposite way, when I think of John Wick, it's the opposite. Like John Wick was this really cool, awesome film, and now they're about to be 4 films deep into it, but the trilogy has been amazing. Like they've all been really good films.
I think the caveat, to be honest, I think still John Wick 1 is the best.
Sure.
But the caveat there is I think it's an action movie, right?
Yeah.
And that kind of helps a lot because the main focus of it isn't necessarily story.
Yeah.
It's more action.
Yeah.
And that kind of blunts the blow of it not being the best in terms of story. It's the same thing with like, Mission Impossible or like James Bond, right?
Yeah.
You don't necessarily go in for the story, right? It's usually pretty much the same story every single time.
Like shooting and
you're watching the movie because of the spectacle.
Yeah.
And so in that case, like I can give it a pass because like sure, like you're not really watching it for like the great story of James Bond or like of Mission Impossible, but if it's like a story-driven film like Train to Busan, right?
Yeah.
And you're trying to make the sequel to that, and it just completely turns into some like action flick,
right?
That totally like misses the spirit of the first film.
Yeah.
Then it's kind of like
I think that's it. Like I mean, I would counter argue like if you have a passion for like what made your film what it is, like you said with John Wick, it's the action. Like,
right, they know what it is. Like they know, they know the heart of the film. That's why.
And so, like with Train to Busan, they kind of missed the mark on that. It was like, what really made Train to Busan what it was? And the second movie was just so different and just so, I don't know, plain at the end of the day. Like it just kind of, it felt like spectacle versus where Train to Busan played a little more emotionally in that sense. But too, with like, if I'm thinking about like Fast and the Furious, for example, like that shit ain't not about cars anymore. like let's be honest. Like it's not about like racing and like driving. It's now about other things. But like, let's say they played the cars into like, this is a car enthusiast film. Maybe we'd be having a different conversation right now. You know what I mean? So I think it's like, you got to play to what really made it great if you're going to kind of make a franchise out of it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But yeah, so anything else you wanted to add?
No, that's pretty much it. I'm excited for the next movie.
Pretty excited or not excited?
Going back into Old Boy.
I'm not excited to feel what I felt the first time.
Honestly, I wasn't too shocked when I watched the first time.
It's more like, it's not like, ooh, shock. It's more like, ugh.
Yeah.
And like, ugh. Like it just gets worse and worse and you're just like, ugh, damn. Like, are we really going to go further and further into this rabbit hole? You feel like a little disgusted.
I'm actually kind of excited to watch it again. I want to seeing it with a completely new eye. Or not a completely new eye, but like a new.
It's been so long, honestly.
Me too.
It's going to be really refreshing for me.
Yeah, same.
I'm going to be like, oh, this feels like I'm watching it almost for the first time again.
Yeah. Because I have forgotten a lot. Yeah. In terms of like
I only remember kind of like the scenes that you're supposed to remember, like obviously the hallway fight, yes. Like I remember some things like when he was stuck in the room, and some things towards the end,
dumplings and
But that's about it. Like I really don't remember like the details
specific, exactly. Like him eating the squid,
exactly,
stuff like that, the octopus, whatever.
The octopus. I totally forgot about that. Yeah. And whatever. So let's see how that plays out. Should be exciting. See you guys next week for that. Cool. Peace.